right, everyone. Thank you for coming to Kreisleriana today. Kreisleriana is one of the greatest pieces of Schumann. It actually was his favorite piece that he composed. But it has problems when you perform it for the public. As a matter of fact, Liszt would never play Kreisleriana for the public. He thought it was too difficult for the public to understand. I agree with him if you hear it all at one go, as it were. There are 8 movements, and it's at least half an hour long. Okay, so it is a difficult piece to kind of keep track of and keep your mind going all the way through. However, what I want to do today is to explain it as I go through it with you. So, I have to tell you a little bit about its history. Actually, there are 1.5 million things to talk about in Kreisleriana. It is a fascinating piece. How it is composed, how it's put together, where its genesis is from, who it's for, all of that is really the subject of a book, I think. However, I'm going to write the book. Nobody run home and write it. So, in any case, I want to tell you basically 2 things about Kreisleriana today. Why it's called Kreisleriana. And secondly, why Schumann wrote it. Okay? So, I'll start with the first. It was written in 1838, in April of 1838, over the course of 4 days. 3 days for the first 7 movements, and then the 4th day was the movement where the 8th one, the last one, came in a white heat, according to Schumann, and I'll talk about that as we go through. But 3 days he wrote this piece. At this time, he was studying the music of Bach, he was studying the music of Beethoven, and of course Paganini was all the rage in Europe at this time. Everyone knows who Paganini is, right? The famous violinist who supposedly sold his soul to the devil, and that's why he could play so well. In any case, he was, subdued by all this music. He was really studying it a lot. And during this time, in April of 1838, he got a letter from Clara, who at that time was Clara Wieck, that was her maiden name. And in this letter, Clara said to him, I have the most fabulous news. I have just become an imperial court virtuoso, which was basically like winning the Van Cliburn of that day. Only a few people had gotten that. Among them, Liszt himself, Paganini himself, another very famous pianist named Thalberg, whom you might know was a great pianist in Paris at the time, and people thought that he and Liszt were the greatest pianists of that time. In any case, this letter that Schumann received in April of 1838 basically was saying that Clara was now famous for life. She had concerts everywhere. It was exactly like winning the Van Cliburn, because of course the last Van Cliburn competition was won by an 18-year-old Yun Chanbin, as we all know. Clara at this time was 18 years old. Okay? This was setting her up. And just to give you a visual aid, I have asked Sarah Wallen, right, Sarah, if she would mind standing, because she is the youngest of us here, and she is 18. Would you mind standing? Okay. So this is Clara at that point. If you can imagine, Clara now is world famous. She has concerts out the wazoo, and she is really set to start her life. And thank you very much, Sarah. It's important for me, whenever I think about Robert and Clara Schumann, I'm always thinking they're older portraits, as it were. But she was young, like you, with your whole life ahead of you. So thank you very much for standing up with me. All right, so Schumann gets this letter, and he realizes that this is great news, right? Because she's going to be more famous than he is, and this is a big problem for him, actually. He says, my wife has a bigger career than I do, and that's not right. First of all, I'm going to be the husband, and secondly, I'm the great Robert Schumann, and I've got stuff to say, and yes, she's a great pianist, but I've got stuff to say. So he says to himself, I have to do something to prove myself, and out comes the Kreisleriana in 3 or 4 days. Schumann was that kind of composer. He was very intuitive and very impulsive. He would simply write whatever was in his head, look at it and say, okay, this could go with this, this could go with this, this could go with this, and he composed the Kreisleriana that way. We know it was done in 3 or 4 days because 3 days after the letter came from Clara, he writes back to her, and we know the dates. And he says, guess what? Since your last letter, I've composed a whole book of things. I'm going to call them Kreisleriana, and I'm going to dedicate them to you and only you, which actually turned out to be a lie. He had to dedicate them to Chopin, as a matter of fact. But in any case, he said, I'm going to dedicate them to you because you and the thought of you play the principal characters. You will smile so sweetly when you see yourself in this music. So it's a great, huge, half half-hour-long Valentine that he sent to Clara to prove himself greater than she was at this point. It's a very complicated piece. But in this piece, he really declares his love for her and about her and for her no matter what the situation is. And Schumann is the composer of love. If you want to know all about love, go to Schumann, because he will tell you about the times when you are infatuated with the person you're in love with, meaning you can't stop thinking about them, literally. They're always better than you are in your mind, and that you just kind of worship them. That's infatuation, and Schumann was definitely infatuated with Clara. He also found that there were times when he was angry with Clara, but still loving her. He hated Clara, but he still loved her. There were times when he simply enjoyed talking with her out of love. There were times when he simply, had a good time playing games with her or telling stories to her. All of that's in Schumann's music, all over the place. So he's the one that if you really want to understand the entirety of love, you go to his music. That's why this piece was composed. In the first movement, you hear a theme that sounds like this. This is thinking about Clara, that half step. These four descending notes are Clara herself. Okay? And of course, that's not just in Kreisleriana. You hear it also in the concerto, which you wrote for Clara. And then you have, what is it? The C, the A, those are the musical notes of Clara's name. This that's her thinking about Clara still. It goes all the way through the Kreisleriana, and I want to show you from movement to movement how he is thinking about her and how he cannot stop thinking about her all the way through. Why call it Kreisleriana? Johannes Kreisler was a fictional character developed by a German writer named E.T.A. Hoffmann. Okay? And Kreisler was a Kapellmeister, a professional musician, who was rather eccentric. And he lived alone. He had a cat, actually. His name was Captain Roer. We'll talk about that later. But he lived alone, and he just simply created music out of his head. If he got an idea, he had to run to the piano to play it, or else it would be gone forever, in a sense. He was up and he was down, and he was very much like Robert Schumann, as a matter of fact. You know that he had bipolar disorder, and so when he was up, he was really up, and writing Kreisleriana in 4 days. And when he was down, he was really down. I wasn't going to say this, but I thought I think I might anyway. The first time that Schumann had a nervous breakdown, okay, it was after a kind of pandemic, as a matter of fact, of cholera that was going around. And he lost one of his family members, and he just kind of broke down because he wasn't living well. He was drinking too much and just not living well. He went to the doctor, and the doctor said, okay, you need a wife. That's your problem. You need someone to take care of you. This is literally the truth. So Schumann started looking around at that point, and there was Clara. Schumann had been studying piano lessons and music lessons with Clara's father. Clara's father, whose name was Friedrich Wieck, was a very ambitious and a very brilliant teacher. Extremely brilliant. The way that he treated Clara when she was young as a student is astonishing. And he really developed Clara as one of the world's greatest pianists. That was his goal for her from the day she was born. He named her Clara because Clara means bright, shining, and he wanted her to be his kind of business card to the world. He and Czerny used to exchange letters actually bragging about their students, because Czerny's star student was Liszt. Okay? And so Czerny would say, oh, Liszt is doing this and Liszt is doing that, and Friedrich Wieck would go, that's great. And so he'd write that back and say, oh, and Clara's doing this and Clara's doing that. So she was kind of set up in such a way. But he was a brilliant teacher and a very good father to her, a really good father. Her parents were divorced, which was very unusual for that time, in the 1830s, and according to German law, the husband got to keep the children, not the mother. So Clara grew up with her father, basically, as a single parent, although he did remarry, and he was everything to her, really. That's going to cause a problem when, at age 16, not even 18, Schumann declares his love and says, you really need to get married to me and leave your father. That's a hard thing, because it's not just leaving her father, it's leaving her teacher and leaving her single parent, as it were. was a big thing he was asking her. All right, so Kreisleriana, I'm sorry, I got off like Schumann. He decided to call it Kreisleriana because in the fictional character's life, there are these highs and lows, these absolute contrasts. And in the music, you will hear in the structure, absolute contrasts. These are all character pieces, A-B-A, or in the case of the second movement, A-B-A-C, kind of codetta to an A at the end. But the sections contrast mightily, okay? That's important to Schumann. It's important in German literature at that moment to have these incredible, well, contrasting scenes. So, let me play the first movement for you, and keep in mind that Schumann is panicked. When he goes for something, he really goes for it. And that's what you hear in this opening movement. You hear this. This is kind of like an insane violinist going back and forth, okay? Paganini, we have to remember. Also, we start with the two notes which are thinking about Clara, and there are moments when actually you bring those notes together very fast, okay, all the way through. So Clara is really well documented in the first movement. The B section section, the C section, has all these. If you write that out, you get a kind of cross that you go from here down, then you come back up, and then you go straight like this. It's in the right hand and the left hand. That is also from Bach, who writes lots of crosses sideways in his music here. But there's lots of that's a sequence that goes down 4 steps, Clara herself. When we get back to the A section, it's a kind of convoluted and chromatic statement. That 4-note passage is Clara kind of crumpled up. I imagine that he sort of crumpled the letter, and now he is spreading it out, and it's chromatic at this point, very crumpled. Okay? And in this section, he really works out his feelings. He says, this is hard. I have to really accept the fact that my wife is a great pianist, or will be a great pianist, and she's going to be more famous than I am. And he ends up saying how much he loves her anyway. He works through this in the most beautiful, harmonic way possible, and finishes with a grand statement of how much he loves her. The second movement is the longest of the entire set. anybody know what that is? Who knows? 5 points to the person who knows. Well, it's someone riding a horse, actually. How many of you have ridden a horse? Well, that's great. That's more than me. I've never ridden a horse. But we know that that is that kind of riding, and people who would hear that would know immediately this is horse riding music all the way through. This figure. That's clave inverted and backwards again, okay? Using all of those notes. There are moments where you have he's thinking about clave in a not very pleasant way at this point, so we hear that. However, the middle section makes up for all of that, and there are all sorts of clave moments. Himself. So you have the right size clave, also the inverted clave here. It's very beautiful. You cannot stop thinking about it. Then, of course, in the end of this movement, you get a sudden burst of energy, and that's Schumann at his famous moment saying, you need to be playing fast, and now even faster, now as fast as possible, and even faster than that at the end. It's quite difficult. And Clara herself wrote to Schumann at one point, I don't know if it was about this piece, but she did say, sometimes your music is a little too hard for me. And I think that that is actually quite comforting, since it's coming from Clara. he was 18, not when Claude was 18, when he was 18, he wrote in his diary that music and poetry are the same thing. Actually, he said Schubert and poetry are the same thing, and that's what he meant, that the music was really what was going on. And in fact, I'm sorry, I'm checking the time to make sure I don't run off at the mouth. He wanted his music to be like speaking. So when you play Schumann's chamber music, for instance, if you play the trios, or you play a slow movement of the quintet maybe, it's a little difficult because the string players, are there any string players here? I'm about to say something. No? Okay, so the string players don't really have the understanding of Schumann as a soloist, as a person who is speaking, and they don't really understand that the entire ensemble needs to be like one spirit or one soul to actually be playing in this. Because we ought not to count in a movement like this. This movement starts. And if I were to count as I was playing that, it would be what? That's correct, that's musical, I hope that's everything's there, but it's not Schumann. Schumann wants to really talk back and forth. So it's a kind of recitative, or a sort of, how should I say, a conversation between him and Claude. And what are they talking about? Well, when Claude's father found out when she was 16 that they were in love, and that it was likely that Schumann was going to propose to marry Claude, he said, "This is not good." First of all, she's only 16. Second of all, Schumann is not living very well. He's not a great guy, okay? Third of all, it's against my business plan, okay? She's got to be out playing concerts. So he said, I've got to do something to make this love die out. And what he decided to do was to take her on tour, which in those days meant that you got in the carriage, you went to Vienna, you sat down for a month, you rented a hall, gave a concert, and hoped people came. The tour process took 18 months, and he really took Clara out of Leipzig, where they were all living, hoping that the love would die out just by keeping her away from Schumann. They weren't even supposed to be writing, although they sent secret letters. When he brought her back to Leipzig to give a kind of triumphal concert, she played, I think it was Papillon, Opus 2 of Schumann, that she played at her concert, because she knew that Schumann would probably be there, and she wanted to represent that she still loved him. Her father was an amazing man. He didn't like Schumann, but he loved his music, so he allowed Clara to play his music. So, in any case, Schumann got the message that she still loved him, and he ran home immediately, because Schumann does everything immediately. He runs home, he writes to her a message and says, "Just send me a simple yes, if you will allow me to ask your father to marry you." And gets his reply, and she says, "All you want is a simple yes, but my heart whispers it to you forever." Okay? 18 years old. Okay. It's really astonishing, I think. You know, and so he gets excited, he asks her to marry her. That word yes, which in German is ja, becomes very important. And the piece starts with the rest, so you have to breathe. That, if you put it in a line, that's a kind of permutation of the Clara movement, for sure, but it's been separated. Just like Clara and Robert have been separated while she was on tour. And just as she is being pulled towards her father for all the good reasons I mentioned earlier, and also pulled towards Robert himself. So she is really separated. The most incredible thing, however, theoretically, is the end. You get these chords, and then finally you get this nice F sharp for a D major chord here. First movement is in D minor. There is a significant portion of the last movement which also is in D minor. So D minor, D minor. And here, after movement 4, at the very heart of the movement is a D major chord. What's the difference between D minor, D major, and D minor? Okay. So Schumann is arranging this whole piece on the thought of Clara this way. It's very powerful and very important. And not only does Schumann have this, and Clara picks up on it, but Brahms, who's the next man who falls in love with Clara, he also picks up on it and has the same thing in his D minor concerto, D minor first movement, D major second movement, D minor last movement until it becomes D major. The D minor violin sonata, opus 108, D minor to D major, then F sharp minor, then back to D minor here, then F natural to F sharp and so forth. He is always thinking about Clara through his life. She must have been an extraordinary woman, I think. Right? So to have both these people fall in love with her. The next movement, movement number 5, is about a cat. Okay? Johannes Kreisler appears in a book called Kattermühr, The Life and Times of Kattermühr. Kattermühr is a tomcat. Okay? And what happens in this book is that the cat writes his autobiography. And in those days, when you wrote, you had a quill and ink thing, so you would dip your ink in and then you would write, and then you'd have to do it more. In order to keep the writing from becoming blurry on the page, you'd have something called blotting paper. You would use another piece of paper to kind of put on top so that it would dry the ink a little bit, and then you would have it. Okay, it would be dry enough to send. What Kattermühr does is he writes his autobiography, but to use as blotting paper, he takes the autobiography of Kreisleriana and then uses that. Okay, so when you're reading this book, you read a bunch of Kattermühr, and then all of a sudden it's Kreisler, and then it's Kattermühr, and then it's Kreisler, like this. That's like this movement, and also the rhythm is very cat-like in a sense. very powerful, very fiery in her playing. So you hear that. Check the time to make sure I can play the last two movements for you. Yes. So, seventh movement is a movement of rage, I have to say. He has really ripped the letter apart in which he tells him his good news. And you hear the motive. That's really the clave theme that has been inverted and torn all the way through. In the middle you have a kind of fugue. And this is another one of those faster still, even faster, as fast as possible, even faster than that kind of last movements. last movement is a ghost story. This is the one that came on the fourth day in a white heat, according to Schumann. And the thing is that when he first met Clara, he was 18 and she was 9. Nothing happened. But he used to tell ghost stories to her and to her little brother, and they ate them up. They loved these ghost stories, okay? And I hope that you know how to tell a ghost story, because what happens is the person who's telling the story is towards the most scary part of the story. They start to make their voice really, really soft. So everyone is hanging on their seat and then they yell as loudly as they can. And everybody's like, oh, that's terrible. That's what happens in this movement. He gets really, really soft. And then it's marked con tutta forza, with all strength and power. And if you listen to the greatest recording of this piece, which is the 1968 Horowitz recording, on long playing records, at that moment, the needle actually jumps off the record. It's incredible, okay, that kind of power. Do I have time? There's something really, okay, I do have time. This movement is full of clave, actually. I read in a book that this sounds like the quodlibet from the Goldberg variations of Bach. What is it? That's the quodlibet theme, okay? And I said, yeah, that's kind of not right. But then I realized that actually, that's Clara turned upside down and backwards. but she married him anyway. It was the most beautiful love, friendship in all of music, really. And Kreisleriana was Schumann's favorite piece that he ever wrote because it came out of this love that he bore for Claude. It's just amazing. I hope you all play it for sure. Does anybody have any quick questions before they kick us out? Yes, Harrison.
Do you think there's any significance in how you organize the work?
Yes, in what I told you, that the beginning, the very heart, and then the end is like that. In terms of the other movements, only that it's fast, slow, fast, slow, fast, slow. He wanted maximum contrast. I'm not sure he composed them in that order. There was another question I thought, yes.
How do you explain the last 2 minutes?
How do I explain?
Explain the last 2 minutes.
Is this a trick? So I don't have an explanation for them except that that's just how it finishes, is dominant tonic. So I don't have an answer for that, I'm sorry to say. So, all right, thank you very much for your attention. I hope that you enjoyed this.